Keys to the Shop, episode 210, The Future of Retail, with special guest Doug Stevens. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Kristys. I'm your host for the show, and I'm really glad you decided to tune in today. Now, if you haven't yet subscribed to the show, I would encourage you to do that. Just hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That way, you'll always be up to date with new content. And if you have the ability to or opportunity, a rating or review on iTunes would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers because they curate the best equipment from all over the world and then work tirelessly to match it with the exact needs of their customers. So if you're in the market for commercial coffee equipment, be it a grinder, brewer, espresso machine, even under-counter refrigeration, they have it all at prima-coffee.com. And if you go to the website, not only are you going to see an amazing selection of, like I said, truly some of the world's best coffee equipment, but also a rich resource in all of their free videos and blogs and just an amazing amount of educational material that they've developed for free for you to be able to learn how to use this equipment well and to make great coffee, which is really what they're about. They're all about equipping you to be successful in making amazing coffee. That's why I love having them as a partner here at Keys to the Shop, and I would encourage you to partner with them as well. So prima-coffee.com, the website to go to, and I think you're really going to love working with the amazing folks over there at Prima Coffee. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Barista Series from Pacific. The Barista Series is the world's leading plant-based performance beverage because not only has Pacific put in so much effort into developing these products with the professional barista in mind, but also they have included the professional barista in the development of these products. So when these things are hitting your shelves, you know that they have been really tested by some of the best out there, and that's why they perform so well on the bar. You can choose anything from their line, from the soy, almond, coconut, oat, rice, and no matter what you choose, you're going to be getting a product that stands up to the heat from the steaming process. It also produces amazing latte art ready milk texture, and the flavor balance of the beverage ends up being focused on the coffee. It's a balance. And so these are really important things for your customer, and I really would recommend trying this for yourself. Let your staff try it, let your customers try it, and see what I mean. I think the Barista Series will be a perfect fit for your bar. Go to pacificfoods.com, follow the link in the show notes to find out more about how the Pacific Barista Series can elevate the plant-based offerings in your cafe. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the future of retail. And of course, this is something that is on all of our minds as the current crisis has us wondering what the future holds for our coffee bars, our brick and mortar stores. What does it mean for the landscape of retail as a whole? How is this changing the customer's expectations, and how should we really adjust ourselves and prepare as these things unfold? And what does the history of movements in retail, what does all that teach us about what to expect here? These are really important questions that I think a lot of us, again, are wrestling with. And to help us unpack a lot of this and more, I have invited to the show and really pleased to welcome Doug Stevens. Doug Stevens is the founder and CEO of Retail Profit. He is one of the world's foremost retail industry futurists. His intellectual work and thinking has influenced many of the most widely known international retailer agencies and brands, including Walmart, Google, L'Oreal, BMW, and LVMH. Prior to founding the consultancy Retail Profit, Doug spent over 20 years in the retail industry, holding senior international leadership roles. Doug is the author of 2 international best-selling books, also Re-Engineering Retail, The Future of Selling in a Post-Digital World, and The Retail Revival, Reimagining Business for the New Age of Consumerism. Doug is also the nationally syndicated retail columnist for CBC Radio and sits on multiple corporate and academic advisory boards. His unique perspectives on retail and business and consumer behavior have been featured in many of the world's leading publications and media outlets, including the New York Times, the BBC, TechCrunch, the Wall Street Journal, and Fast Company. And I'm really excited to present to you this conversation where I think a lot of clarity and just a direction is given as we talk about how retail is changing, what we can do to be in a good position with our businesses as it changes, and how we can serve our customers well amidst that change. And so there's a lot of different topics that we're going to cover here. I think this is a really timely conversation, and it's also very instructive. So I hope you have your notepads and are ready to learn about the future and what it holds for specialty coffee. Here now is my conversation with Doug Stevens of The Retail Prophet. Well, Doug, welcome to Keys to the Shop. I'm excited to get a chance to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
We said this when we first got on the phone, but good considering the circumstance. Always a qualifier there, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's the common disclaimer these days. And I will say the same. I think that that's certainly an adjustment from both a business and a personal standpoint, but all for a good cause if we can stop this animal in its tracks.
That's a great way to put it, an animal. We are all striving to figure out how to get back to some semblance of normal, if that's even possible. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of that, as we react to the market changing and our demographics sort of moving like tectonic shifts, we're trying to figure out also what's it going to look like to run this business into the future. And that's why I'm excited to talk with you today. I guess we could start this conversation by talking a little bit about your background and involvement in the world of retail, and what do you do with the prediction of the trends in retail as a retail futurist?
Yeah, I'll give your listeners just a very, very quick overview of my experience. I spent about a little bit more than 20 years in the retail industry in both Canada and the US. I worked with various companies and brands on the operations side, marketing, human resources for a short period of time, and then franchise sales. So I'm sort of familiarized myself with each of these various disciplines, and both on the retail and the manufacturing side. In 2009, speaking of crises, we were just sort of coming off the heels of another major economic crisis. I decided that I was going to start Retail Prophet. And the reasoning behind that was that my experience in retail had told me essentially that the retail industry was an industry that by habit was often fatally short-sighted, very much a quarter-to-quarter earnings report to earnings report kind of industry. And for that reason, I felt that it was very open to being blindsided by shifts that were taking place in the market, or these black swans that would sort of come out of nowhere and upend business. So with that, I began Retail Prophet with the objective of really trying to create a longer term view of retail and to put together a contextual picture of how these changes in technology, media, demographics, economics would add up to a different looking retail landscape. And so with that, I began writing, researching, speaking with various organizations, groups, and companies. I've since that time written 2 books, The Retail Revival, Reimagining Business for the New Age of Consumerism. That came out in 2013. And then in 2017, I launched my second book, Reengineering Retail, The Future of Selling in a Post-Digital World. And I'm in the process right now of writing a third book. I also do radio work. I'm a syndicated retail columnist for CBC Radio here in Canada and a contributor to the Business of Fashion magazine in the UK. The clients that we work with are as big as IKEA, Microsoft, Coca-Cola, et cetera, but we also work with trade associations. I do an awful lot of speaking work every year for trade associations that represent many of the people that are probably listening to this podcast right now. So certainly a fascinating industry to be tracking, and my career in it has been just incredibly enjoyable.
When we're talking about long-term conversations in retail, what things have been proven to be become the fabric of the way retail is now, and how is what we're experiencing now sort of either proving that to still be true or shifting it?
So, in reengineering retail, it really looked at this whole confluence of physical and digital retail and the interplay between the two. And it really sought to understand what the rightful place of both of these channels are, whether or not indeed they can coexist, and the degree to which, from my view, they were actually sort of trading roles. And by that, I mean that it's becoming sort of abundantly evident that consumer preference and consumer comfort with buying things online is increasing exponentially. We are now obviously in the COVID-19 world seeing the degree to which now consumers are quite comfortable just moving consumption of their everyday items over to the Amazons of the world, or in other parts of the world, it might be Alibaba or JD.com. But I was really interested pre-COVID to understand that where is all this going? Is there a rightful place for the physical environment, for the physical store? To what extent will our consumer behavior move online, and online become the channel where we simply buy things on a day-to-day basis? And so it really sought to sort of paint a picture of that. I think the realization for me is that, and I'm not specifically talking here about hospitality necessarily, but just sort of consumer behavior in general, is that what we're seeing is an inversion of the old purchase funnel. The old purchase funnel that sort of operated on the premise of putting loads and loads of media into the top of the funnel in the hope of driving consumers to retail distribution is in fact flipping over. And physical stores on an increasing basis are becoming the place where the consumer becomes acquired. As a channel to acquire customers, physical stores, physical shops and locations now are actually less expensive from a customer acquisition point of view than digital media. The digital media landscape is becoming prohibitively expensive as a customer acquisition vehicle. And so the learning was that stores can become wonderful places where consumers go to experience everything a brand has to offer: products, service, culture, events, entertainment, a degree of hospitality, and galvanize a relationship with a brand that can be then carried online. Because there is no question in my mind, if we look forward, even 10 or 15 years, my belief, and I think the mathematics of it bears this out, is that most of our consumption is going to move online. We're going to buy most of our groceries, most of our day-to-day needs, most of our apparel will come to us online. But that doesn't negate the value of physical stores. It just means that we have to use physical stores in an entirely different way than we have in the past. So I think that's really one of the big takeaways. One of my big takeaways, anyway, from the last 5 years, is this flipping of the funnel. And some companies like Nike, for example, clearly understand that. They clearly get that. And you may notice that Nike just reported their results the other day in the midst of COVID, and their results are phenomenal, with a 36% increase in online sales, a 5% increase over last year in terms of top line revenue. So the brands that get this fundamental transition are doing very, very well.
So when we're talking about physical stores like a coffee shop, for example, we're being backed into a corner to have to overnight use like Square's online store. I know many people, I've talked to many owners who have spent the entire night setting up the ability to set up an online store, which for lots of them, that was sort of a plan. Like, yeah, I'll get to it. I'll open up that channel, and now our backs are against the wall. We have to do that. are we seeing that become sort of a permanent channel that opens up where bigger companies invest, I think, maybe more because they have the power to employ people to think about those trends, whereas a coffee shop is just welcoming people in. We're making lattes. We're taking it year by year, It seems like the bigger players are projecting much further out and are ahead of the curve, and now we're being updated, as I guess. Would that be an accurate assessment?
I think that's a really accurate assessment. I mean, let's recall. And I guess you'd have to go back. I don't know, 5, 6, maybe more years, to the point where Starbucks began to introduce digital ordering, mobile ordering. They moved their loyalty program onto the app. They moved their menu onto the app. They were really, really aggressively promoting that consumers use the app. And there were critics at that point that were sort of saying, oh, well, this is still a fraction of their sales, and only about 20% of their customer base is using this app at all. But what Starbucks was doing at the time was building a degree of resilience into the business that could give them the flexibility. Not that they were foreseeing COVID-19 necessarily, but I think what they were doing was simply preparing for a future that seemed inevitable, that understanding that as consumers, most of our lives now were centering around our mobile devices, that new levels of convenience in other categories, whether it was Uber or Airbnb or any myriad of categories, would somehow influence consumer expectations in the restaurant industry and in the coffee industry. And so they prepared all those years ago for something that has now, to an extent anyway, been helpful for them. So yeah, I think that this is sort of the idea behind a lot of the work that we do here at Retail Profit, is working with brands and associations that represent businesses to help them look that far into the future, to imagine the consumer state 5, 10 years down the road. And with that, understand the things that we can do today to build that sort of resilience into our business.
I like that idea of building resilience into the business. And my question, I suppose, is that is it the tail wagging the dog? Are we creating the trend by investing into the resilience? In other words, customers can only really buy what's offered by a coffee shop. So Starbucks starts to see the writing on the wall in terms of digital, but is it something that's perpetuated by the continuing offering of gift cards online or online ordering and things like that? Is it truly what customers want, or is it something that we're telling them that they want?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that what we have seen, and again, I mean, consumer behavior is a tricky thing, because on the one hand, consumers will, if we ask consumers what they want, oftentimes we don't really get the truth. We get sometimes what they cognitively believe they want, which isn't always necessarily evident in their behavior. But what we can tell from behavior is that consumers are really gravitating toward two very different kinds of experiences in the marketplace. And on the one hand, it's what I call a high fidelity experience. So, I mean, if we think about Starbucks Roastery, for example, one of their roastery locations that is obviously much, much more than just about going in and grabbing a cup of coffee. It's this whole environment. It's the beautiful architecture. It's, the design of the space and the very social nature of those spaces. So I would classify that as sort of being the high fidelity Starbucks experience. On the other hand, there's also the high utility experience where the consumer says, you know what, I appreciate that and that's great, but all I really want is I want a cup of coffee, I want it fast, and I want it easy. And that's where mobile ordering and drive-through comes in. So consumers are gravitating very clearly and very evidently through their spending to these two very different kinds of experiences in the marketplace. What they're ignoring is everything else that's in the middle that offers maybe a little convenience and a little bit of experience, but isn't really dominant in either of those. So, I mean, and this is sort of across categories, whether, if, you can stay home and you can watch something on Netflix, really simple, really easy, low cost, or you can go to a VIP theater and eat sushi and have a glass of wine while you watch a movie. We're seeing all markets now really bifurcating in these two very, very distinct directions. And as businesses now, we have to choose which of those lines are we going to follow? Are we going to be the high fidelity player in our market, or are we going to be the high convenience player in the market? It's a decision every business is going to be forced to make.
So what is the future of the brick and mortar then? You mentioned that it's the customer acquisition center. So I imagine you fall in love with the brand by the service, by the experience of the product. And with our product, it's not like we could ship a latte to you for cheap in bulk, you
Right.
know. So there is it seems like there's always going to be this experiential element to it. But what does that look like when we're doing it well? And is there a future in that?
I believe there is. I truly believe that, because look, I mean, this is certainly not the first crisis that we as a species have gone through. Through the ages, there have been any number of different interruptions, whether they be great wars, recessions, pandemics, plagues. The list goes on. But the fact of the matter is, we are human and we are social animals and we crave social experiences. I mean, witness the number of people, even in this situation, who are being forced into quarantine or a degree of lockdown in their cities. And yet, we see beaches filled with people because they're just dying to get out and to socialize. And so this essence of humanity, I think, is something that will always keep physical spaces relevant. And in fact, I would argue that as we become more and more tethered to technology and technology becomes a more and more pervasive factor in our lives, that craving of the physical, of the social, of the emotionally connected experience is going to become even more important. So I don't look at this necessarily as sort of a high watermark in terms of digital just simply becoming the way we buy everything, the way we live our lives, negating the value of physical experiences. It may change our expectations of those physical experiences, but our need for them as human beings certainly will not go away.
Yeah, well, it does seem that we are judging our technology based on how closely it resembles those physical interactions and experiences. And that's what gives an edge to any particular app or website where you create something that experientially feels like, hey, it's like I'm there, or I really am in the coffee shop, or experiencing the culture that the baristas bring. And I just talked with an owner in Portland, and she is trying to put lots of videos out on Instagram of silly things that maybe people can't see now because nobody's allowed in her store. So
Right.
she's trying to maintain a connection, as she says, to the people, because the people want that as well. And so I suppose, part of me thinks, and I hear you saying this too, that something like COVID-19 is creating a scarcity of something that we feel a need for, which could just rocket it in popularity and create a even better market for brick and mortar afterwards.
Yeah, I agree. Just as we have pent up demand for products, I think we also have pent up demand for experiences. And again, that deficit of being able to commune, to spend time, to socialize. I think that will definitely. And again, we saw that after 9/11. We saw this rampant return to consumerism after 9/11, where everyone thought the economy was going to absolutely tank. In the fourth quarter of 2001, it came roaring back. So, I think that there's certainly, as I say, there's a place for both. physical retail and digital. But from a coffee shop owner standpoint, and while you might, and you're absolutely right in saying that, it's not like you go on a mobile app, buy a latte and have it delivered to your home. But what you can do is you can sell gift cards, you can sell beans, you can sell grinders. It opens up this entirely new channel, and most importantly, that digital acuity being available to your consumer through mobile, through digital, also now gives you a communication channel that if you're sensible about using and you're respectful of your customers' time and bandwidth for listening to messages from you, and if you're providing great content, you can carry on a really wonderful conversation with your customers now that you wouldn't have been able to do before.
So, well, that leads into something that I'm really interested in, which is how to maintain an experiential edge when the physical experience now is, for all intents and purposes, prohibited by government, and so now we have the opportunity to invest in something like this, and really, it's going to buoy our business later on. So, what are some best practices for creating a experiential technology experience?
Good question. A couple of things I've always found interesting, and I think it maybe hopefully offers some consolation to your listeners. If we look through history and we look at periods of crisis, what we can see from those periods of time, and again, whether it's the Great Depression of 1929 or the Great Recession of 2007, 2008, we see businesses emerge out of those times of crisis. We can clearly see the connection between crisis and creativity. If you look at companies, for example, General Electric, born in the midst of a recession, IBM, General Motors, FedEx, and more recently Uber, Airbnb, WhatsApp, and Square. You mentioned them, again, the product of another recession. So crisis is a time when we are forced, in many cases, to be creative. And what we've been doing here at Retail Profit over the course of the pandemic is we've been tracking some of the really interesting and unique things that businesses have been doing to try and cope with this and to try and redefine what that virtual experience looks like, for example. So, for example, there's a toy store in New York that's offering virtual experiences to kids where they can connect online with a salesperson who will literally walk the store and show them all the toys that are available, and they can make purchases right online. Salons and other skilled work where companies have been selling futures. So in other words, they're saying, look, we'll give you a $100 salon treatment and we'll offer it today for $75. And when the pandemic is over, come on in and get your $100 worth of salon treatments. We've seen companies that previously didn't do any delivery now exploring delivery and curbside pickup, restaurants becoming grocery stores. I mean, so these are times of remarkable creativity. And I think if nothing else, if something positive can come out of this, I think it's an opportunity for businesses to really just to stop and consider what their current end-to-end consumer experience looks like and break out every moment of that experience and ask yourself the question, is this as dynamic as it could be? Could we offer the consumer an alternative in this particular moment? Could we offer them a digital opportunity to buy or to shop or to understand our product lineup? This is the time to do that. While everyone else in your category might be just fretting, immobilized with fear, this is the time to really examine how the business could be improved.
Wow. It's really difficult to do that, but I do see a lot of people doing it. And that gives me so much respect for people who are trying to survive, but at the same time, they are able to find some mental margin to create a new way of doing business for the future of their business. And I do think that's going to be the determining factor of how we get out of this is how much of our mental state is in the future versus just, paycheck to paycheck right now. Literally, I think we'll get through this based on that creativity. And also the brand that we've developed with customers, we've said on the show before that is not the physical space necessarily. It's the relationships that you develop. So people, have a set of values that they attribute to interacting with your brand.
Yeah.
What is the importance in your mind of branding and how it factors into the identity of the business? Are we going to see kind of a renewed focus on branding?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think sometimes in business we get confused. We get the idea of branding confused with advertising. We look at branding as an exercise. That we're going to divert dollars from from store operations into branding, for example. But I don't look at branding and advertising as being the same thing at all. Branding is what I'll put it the other way. Advertising is what you say about yourself. Branding is what people believe about you. Branding is a product of what you do. And it is also the product of what others say about you, not just what you say about yourself. And so I think that what we have witnessed over the last several weeks as we've been tracking the moves that companies are making, the measures that they're having to put in place in order to maintain their businesses, we've been tracking things like the treatment of their staff. Are you just laying everyone off without any compensation for that? Or are you treating your people with respect and dignity and caring for them? Are you simply trying to push as much product as you possibly can before the lights go out? Or are you being a responsible member of the community, showing concern for the safety of your customers? These are the moments where you establish really in the minds of consumers who you are. And I recall an ad that Nike just ran recently, and must have spent a lot of money doing it too. But it was an ad that basically said, look, if you want to play for everyone right now, then just stay at home. Isolate yourself, stay at home, play for everyone. And it was just a really impactful ad that to me spoke volumes about the character of Nike as a company. And so to me, that's, there's no better time than right now to show consumers who you are as a company or as an owner and what your culture is all about.
100%. I love that thought. What are some things that retailers are doing that are, in your mind, mistakes right now in the midst of the crisis? We've seen a few things. And again, as we've been sort of trying to go through the market and collect the good examples, inevitably you come across the examples that aren't so positive. But I think that the general themes are, if you're seen to be pandering for sales during this period of time, if it seems as though you're trying to use this as an opportunity for commercialism, that's certainly something to stay away from. And I know that that's difficult because I know how many small business people in particular are they need every sale they can get. A week without any revenue is virtually disastrous, and I understand that. So I understand the urge to want to sell, but this is not the time to do it. There's also a tendency in times like this to focus internally, to focus on the needs of your business as opposed to the needs of your customers. And so an outward focus is a great thing to maintain. But probably the most dangerous thing a business can do during this time is simply double down on their current business model and practices. To simply say, well, there's nothing we can do because this is our business and this is the way we do business. And until this whole thing blows over, we just have to wait. And that gets back to this idea that no, now is the time when you need to question everything. And you need to use this as sort of an opportunity where the universe is tapping you on the shoulder and giving you some advice about how your business
should go forward. Because the fact of the matter is, and we have to be honest about this, not only is this pandemic unprecedented in our lifetimes, at least for most of us, but it could also result in a follow-on recession that could be deeper than the financial crisis of 2007-8. And we have to be prepared for that as well. So we're not out of this yet. We may not be out of this for many months, potentially years. And so businesses are really going to have to use this time and the energy they have to reinvent how they go to market.
Agreed. The universe and Doug are tapping you on the shoulder, telling you to get creative and retool a little bit. You had mentioned something in the beginning of that where I have a follow-up question, because I feel as though what I've seen is that customers of coffee shops all over the world really are wanting to support their coffee shop. And the coffee shop is saying, hey, we're available. I've seen coffee shops like in New Jersey, Penstock Coffee, turning their coffee shop into a grocery store, the same as a restaurant has done as well. They're inviting their customers out, and the customers, there's this mutuality that says, we want to help you because we know if you don't have any revenue past this certain point, you really aren't going to come back from it. And we want you to maintain your business. And so they're selling to their customers via mobile apps or online, curbside pickup, those types of things. So I'm wondering, what is the line between commercialism that's just about trying to make money and, sort of this mutually reinforcing social contract that seems to be happening with small businesses, where we all want success, and it might not be seen as pandering, or it might not be seen as commercialism, because if you're saying it's going to go on for a long time, potentially, there's only so much we can do before we do need to start selling. So what's the responsible way to continue sales while maintaining integrity?
Yeah. I think, again, it comes back to the focus. It comes back to showing a sensitivity for the state of your customers, the state that they are in. And using your example, there are two ways to go about kind of proactively reaching out to customers as a small business within the community. And I've seen both. I've seen situations where small businesses have reached out to consumers, and essentially they have shared with the consumer their own concerns about their business. So, to our customers, we're a small member of your community. We depend on you for sales. This is a very difficult time for us and for our employees. And as a member of your community, we're asking for your support. Okay, that's an approach. And maybe there are consumers or customers who read that and say, that's true. I should do what I can to support that business. But the other way to look at it is to say, in an unselfish way, what are our customers going through? What are their needs right now? What are their emotional insecurities right now, or their fears? How can we use our business to help them? How can we make their lives a little bit more pleasant in this really difficult time? And at the same time, obviously present what we have to offer to them. I think it's a much, much more positive approach. And it's not saying, hey, listen, feel sorry for us now because of what we're going through. It's saying, look, we empathize with you and what you're going through. And we want to use all of the resources that we have to make your life a little bit better. And if that means, us delivering coffee to your doorstep for you, or selling you something today that you can use when this whole thing is over, to enjoy in our shops, that's a totally different kind of approach. And I think it would be received in a very different manner as well. So it is not to say that you cannot trade, you cannot do business, you can't sell, but to do so with a sense of sensitivity to the situation and a clear sense of empathy for what your consumer's going through, I think is the way to go.
Well, it does make sense also that hospitality workers and businesses would be very good at that, because empathy and preemptive service is part of what the best of us are best at. And
Exactly.
so when we take a look at our actions right now, if you had to tell a coffee shop owner, hey, here we are current, it is the 26th of March as we're having this conversation. And here are the things that you should focus on right now with your business that will actually be partially an investment into your future as a business. What would you tell that person?
So a few things. What we often do with businesses, we run workshops where we'll take companies into a room and we essentially try to sort of dissemble their thinking about their business. We try to break down a lot of the current paradigms that they have around their industry. And it's a process, and I think it's a process right now that a lot of business owners could take themselves through. But the first step is really to ask this question around your brand, and that being, what is it that your brand offers in the marketplace that you don't believe anyone else does? What truly makes you unique and stand out relative to competition in your category? What is it that customers look to you for? What is the unique selling proposition that you have that they can't find anywhere else? What are the paradigms in your industry? What are the things that in your industry people say, no, there's no way you could ever do that? Or this is the way we've done things for years and it'll always be that way. What are those paradigms and could they be shattered? So asking a lot of these kinds of questions is really, really important right now. And as I said, focusing on, what is our experience today as a coffee shop, for example? What is the end-to-end customer experience? What does it look like? Let's draw it out graphically so we understand all of the various moments and micro moments that a consumer goes through in doing business with us. And let's examine each of those. Let's look for those opportunities to leverage technology. Let's look for those opportunities where we could serve consumers in a different way. And here's maybe the most important question, Chris, and that is, if you're a coffee shop, you have to ask yourself, what if we didn't make any money selling coffee? What else could we do to derive revenue? Could we sell workshops to consumers on how to brew great coffee at home? Could we sell accessories? Could we host events in our stores in the evenings that we invite people to and charge admission for? All of these kinds of questions are things that businesses should be asking now, again, to make them more resilient, not just in the event of another crisis coming along 10 years from now, but literally make them more resilient and profitable tomorrow.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider what you kind of led with in this conversation, that the model for retail is flipping, in that the experience you have in the store is going to fuel where you're making your money in other areas. You're acquiring the customer through that experience, and the more channels you have to express your brand through that place and through your company, the better. And you're just embracing what was already happening pre-COVID crisis.
Exactly.
Well, Doug, this has really been eye-opening and I think encouraging as we look to the future and we continue to invest in trying to get through this with an eye to how we can become better through it. I think you've done a lot to help us gain some perspective on that. So I thank you for that. And how can we stay in touch with your work, your writing, and this new book coming out?
By all means, if any of your listeners want to visit us at Retail Prophet, and that's PROPHET, retailprofit.com. That's the mothership. Everything is there. You'll find links to books, articles, podcasts, videos, all of which, again, are designed to really help people that are either running businesses or are the owners of businesses.
Thank you so much, Doug. Really a pleasure to talk to you today.
My pleasure, and you, Chris. Thank you.
All right. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that episode and that a lot of what was discussed landed with you and resonated with your situation. Maybe you find yourself in a place where you feel like, this is the writing on the wall. This is the time for me to reassess some things. And I really think we should take Doug's advice and, at the very least, rethink how our customer experience flows from end to end and take a look at what could be retooled, what could be optimized. And when business returns, we'll be able to receive people with a more optimized way of serving, a more resilient business model, and a mindset that is even more dedicated to serving them. Having that outward mindset that is really key to being able to serve well and allow the business to do good in the world. So a big thank you to Doug for joining us on Keys to the Shop. We really appreciate your work and wisdom here. Now, if you want to dive deeper into the Retail Profit and find out more information, you can go to retailprofit.com. That's profit as in PROPHET, retailprofit.com. You will find out more information about Doug's podcasts, his workshops, also his speaking, and his books. And stay tuned for his third book. His books, Reengineering Retail and The Retail Revival, are two books you should definitely look into for your library. So again, that's retailprofit.com. And if you want the transcript from this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com. On the contact page, you can just fill out your information, click sign me up for the newsletter, and then you will be signed up to receive the transcript in an email newsletter along with other links and resources. And also you'll be able to receive news about different projects and opportunities that come up with Keys to the Shop. So again, that's keystotheshop.com over on the contact page. And that's also a great place to just reach out to me. If you want to ask me a question, if you want to give me feedback about the show, comments, etc., you can reach out through that or just email me directly, chris@keystotheshop.com. You can also reach out through that email if you have questions about or want to explore working with me, Keys to the Shop Consulting, to help you in your business to take your operations and your business to the next level. That's chris@keystotheshop.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me on the show. I truly hope that this made the future a little bit more clear for you and your business. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.